Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to tonight's second half. Before we jump into tonight's second half, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into tonight's second half, shall we? A experience that came out of the Canadian Rockies, out of a region called Tumbler Ridge. And a gentleman reached out to me, just kind of shared a little bit of the information of what he can vividly recall. And then he had a friend with him. He wanted to get his side of the story. He wanted me to get his side of the story so I could just share it completely with you. Tumbler Ridge is in the Canadian Rockies. It's in the middle of the Canadian Rockies, deep. And it's a municipality. It's not very big. There's about 2,000 folks that live up there. And it's pretty much a coal mining town. More or less a city with 2,000 people, because it's not spread out. It's kind of right there, buildings and such. Small city, I'd consider it. And so these guys had gone out hiking for the day, and they went out to an area called Mount Puggins, and they wanted to go hike up into that area, go check out the fire lookout station, and just kind of make a day of getting away from work, kind of just explore the area. They are not native to Tumbler Ridge. And they actually met through work while residing up there. So via the first person that I spoke with, they had hiked for most of the day, and they were going to camp out. They found this really nice, it's not a lake, but it is part of a lake. There's all these little ponds that are spread out, that are either attached to the main lake via a underground kind of stream or aqueduct, or an above ground stream. And they found this really beautiful little pond. They're sitting down, just relaxing and looking out, just really beautiful day. And what they see on the other side is what appeared to be a boulder. All of a sudden, the boulder starts to move, and they both are like, hey, what the hell is that movement? What's going on? And it starts to rise up, and they realize that that's not a boulder. That is a set of shoulders attached to a head. That's an awful big head. And this humanoid creature kind of walks out of the pond, not facing them, on the opposite side of this pond, and stands there completely nude, no hair, humanoid in every way, human-like in every way, minus being somewhere between 16 to 18 feet tall. And they kind of gasp, like, what the is that, out loud, and this thing hears them and turns around. As it had turned around, it was putting kind of like it's almost like a kind of hide skinned outfit thing that it must have constructed. Obviously there's needlepoint, but it didn't really look like a Fred Flintstone loincloth thing. It fit like a shirt and like a set of pants. It had turned and looked at them, and they both got up and started running, not knowing exactly where to run to. Like I said, they're not native to this area. They've never hiked this area before. And they just knew where this fire lookout was on Mount Puggins. And, they're thinking, let's make our way back that way. Now, where they are in the Canadian Rockies, there are, high points and low points. And as they're running, they don't see this giant coming after them. They don't hear it. They don't see anything. They just run because they realize that it saw them. All of a sudden, they hear a bunch of racket coming through the woods. It sounded like a bulldozer was plowing through the woods, and it literally was running through the trees. They were on a trail, of course, and this thing's just kind of making a straight line towards them through the trees, just knocking trees over. And the initial gentleman that I spoke to, he had fallen and hit his head, split his forehead wide open, knocked himself out cold. His friend had dragged him about 20 to 30 feet into this kind of cavern, barely big enough to fit both men, deep enough to where this thing couldn't stick its hand in. It was about 10 to 15 feet back from the entrance to the wall. So it's trying to stick its hand in to get them. The first gentleman doesn't remember that part because he was out like a light. The second gentleman, from his perspective now, was when they saw this thing, what he saw was the same exact thing up until he fell, hit his head. This thing looked down into this cavern and stared at them. It did have a very human-like face. He said that it didn't resemble any kind of primate face. It didn't resemble a Bigfoot face. It didn't have that kind of broad nose, like a caveman, and how you would think a giant would look like. He said that it had almost Anglo features to it. It was very white. It had kind of this sandy blondish hair. Not blonde and not brown. So just this sandy blonde hair. And it had green eyes when it looked down through this cavern opening at them. It's sticking its hand in trying to get their legs or any part of their body. He's trying to keep his friend's legs away, hoping that his friend will wake up and not freak out and kick his legs out or kick him out, in a state of panic. His friend does come to at some point when this creature has now stood up, and all you can see is its feet and about up to its shin line. And it starts walking kind of around. He can see it kind of almost like do a 360. They can feel the vibration behind them, like it's looking for a back entrance to this cave to see if it can pull them out. It comes back, and it has a stick, like a tree, pretty much a tree. It'd be a stick for us. This thing's 18 feet tall, and it's jamming it in. He had gotten hit 2 or 3 times and received broken ribs and some lacerations on his chest. Finally, the thing kind of gave up and started to walk away. His friend is now awake, bleeding, and they are kind of stuck where they're at. They can't go out because they can't see. They can't see outside of this cave. So he kind of reaches into his pack, gets his first aid kit, tends to his friend's head damage, starts tending to himself, and realizes, I'm having a hard time breathing. This thing broke some ribs, like sticking that stick in there. We need to get out of here, or I'm not going to do well. My running ability is screwed at this point. But he is more coherent than his buddy, the first guy that I had spoke to, because obviously he's concussed. He then crawls to the entrance of the cavern and looks out, and he doesn't see a thing. It's starting to get dark. They got a couple of hours left of daylight. And so his friend is now more coherent, still concussed, obviously. But he's like, we need to get to the fire lookout. I'm having a hard time breathing. My ribs are broken. You're bleeding profusely from your head. Are you capable of walking on your own? Or should I go out on my own and try to get to this fire lookout myself? The decision is made roughly 45 minutes later. Now we're talking 2 hours. Time had passed from this thing walking away. Mind you, they didn't see which way it went. They just feel like that it went back to where it had come from initially, which would be that pond. So they make the decision, let's push on. If this thing's going to get, one of us, it's going to get both of us. We'll die fighting this thing. I'm not going to die out here alone, and I don't want you dying out here alone. So they crawl out and they start hiking towards Mount Puggins fire lookout. So they make the decision to start walking. They figure roughly they are about an hour from where the Mount Puggins lookout would be, which would put them about an hour and a half away from where their vehicle would be to get out of there. So they start walking. It's going slow. It's starting to get dark. but they're not hearing anything. They don't hear any kind of stomping, any kind of smashing of trees, but they do hear nature. So at that point, they're like, all right, as long as we can hear birds and any kind of, native animal to this area, we're good. What do we do now if we hear the stomping coming out? Where are we going to go? How we're well away from our cavern where we were. There's not too much safety from this thing. Obviously, this thing is going to plow through trees. We can't outrun it. We can't outfight it. The best thing we can do is stand our ground. That's the decision they come to. And they start, they're half an hour in, and they start to get this just really weird feeling like, haven't we seen this embankment before? Or did we pass this cliffside 20 minutes ago? Just this kind of deja vu feeling, like very strange, like we've been here. Are we going in circles? Obviously we're not. They got a compass with them. They know, they're going in the right direction. But the landmarks are strangely the same, which they weren't coming in. So they are now getting nervous. They can still hear nature's life. But now they're freaking themselves out because of the landscape looking very similar to places they've passed, 20 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, and they just keep walking. They keep walking the way the compass is telling them is the way back to Mount Ruggins. They get to this area, and the second subscriber that I talked to, he now realizes, okay, I've recall this place, but I recall it from earlier today. Maybe it's our brains, telling us that this, and that was what we passed. But later on, after they get out of this area and they do get home safely, they start to discuss it, and it gets real strange. They can see now in the distance the fire lookout, and they're both like, we're good. They've got about 20 minutes to, the speed they're walking, 20 minutes to this fire lookout. It'd be 10 minutes for someone who's not hurt, someone who's not dealing with, being concussed, and someone who doesn't have broken ribs. Now they are halfway from where they initially were when they first saw it, and they look over to the right side where there's a mountain chain. It's part of this mountain, part of the Rockies, the Canadian Rockies. And they realize that the silence has struck. There is no noise. There is no wind. There is no call of the birds. There's just nothing. And they both start to get, they both realized it at the same time. And they get really freaked out. And they stop, and they're starting to look around, thinking this giant is going to come out of the woods and just grab them before they get to the lookout. And the first subscriber is like, I'm okay. Let's, keep walking. We're almost there. Second one, the one who saved the guy that I spoke to initially says, let's go. You're right. Let's go. We're not hearing anything other than the silence. We'll keep pushing on. They are approximately a football field length away from the fire lookout. And they hear this kind of wail behind them. It didn't sound like a howl. It didn't sound like kind of anything they had ever heard. They both have looked into different calls. Like they've both listened to, audio from different areas of people saying, this may be a Bigfoot, this may be a Dogman. What is this shriek that I caught? It matched nothing like that. But when they hear it, they get this just weird kind of dizziness that falls over them. And they both turn and look, and standing probably another football field away, so smack dab in the middle, right the way they came, is this man, a humanoid, a man, wearing what appeared to be like this gray kind of, not a suit, but just a shirt and gray pants, just gray, very not black and not white, just very uncolored, no blue, no red, but not black or white either. Just this plain kind of terrifying color. And that was the word that the gentleman, the second guy that I talked to, said. It was almost like it lacked in good and evil. Good you associate with white, black, pitch black is evil, and color is human, is, the in-between. And all of a sudden it does this wail again, and they can physically feel it hit them and kind of push them back a little, almost like infrasound would, but they can hear this very abnormal sound. And what they see next, they don't know what or how to classify it, because it stood there and it appeared to be wings just spread out from behind this thing's back, and it just took off straight up into the sky and went back towards the way they had just come, back towards where this giant was at. And at that point, they turn and they watch it fly. And both said it was like 4 wing strokes, and it was just, so fast. It didn't fly like a bird. It flew like nothing they had ever seen. It didn't have red eyes, because I was like, do you think it was like something like the Mothman? And they were like, no, it had human features. It didn't have glowing eyes. Obviously it's getting darker, and it's about a football field away from us, but you could still make out that it had that human kind of design to it. No glowing eyes, and it just shot up into the air. And I was like, well, how big do you think this thing was? And they both said, probably 7.5, 8 feet tall, bigger than us, smaller than this giant that we had just seen, by far smaller, but bigger than us. And its wings appeared to be, 6-7 feet on each side. And it just went straight up. Crazy enough is its wings were the color of its pants, or the clothing it was wearing. So it was gray, these gray wings. They couldn't make out hair. They could make out like human skin. Not African American black, not Caucasian white, but like this kind of combination of both. But not like a reptilian, nothing like that. Just this gray, except it's what, you know, their hands. They could see their hands and they could see its face. Sorry about that. And it was gone, but it was gray. They get to the lookout and there is a fire ranger there. And he is, you know, runs up and sees them. And the guys are like, "Did you just see that?" And he's like, "No, what are you talking about?" And they're like, "Didn't you just hear that, like, kind of wailing?" And he's like, "I didn't hear a thing. What are you talking about? You're bleeding. You're freaking hurt bad. We got to get you out of here." And both guys are like, "Just take us to our car, you know, give us a ride to the car. We don't have a way of getting back to our car." And he's like, "I'm taking you guys to the hospital. You guys are going to the hospital. And you guys can, you know, I'm sure someone will get you to your vehicle. If not, I'll make arrangements to get your vehicle to you, to your hospital, to the hospital." They get in the vehicle and they kind of start asking the ranger questions. Like, they do not say anything about the giant, nor this humanoid with wings that just watched them. Literally was just watching them. And, you know, did nothing to cause them harm, but did cause fear. Because obviously you're going to be, you know, it's going to startle you. You just got chased by this fucking 18-foot monster. And then here's this humanoid that's gray and it's got these wings and it goes straight up and gone. But they hint around to Bigfoot or the paranormal. And, you know, he kind of laughs and says, "You know, this area has a history of playing games with people's minds. But I myself have never seen anything out here. I've had some weird feelings, but I've never seen a Bigfoot or any kind of, you know, ghost, any kind of monsters, you know, just weird feelings." They get to the hospital and they are treated for broken ribs, lacerations, concussed laceration on his forehead. And they get admitted overnight. They are in separate rooms and they are, you know, resting. The next morning they figure out, you know, hey, the ranger he had, you know, another ranger come with him to bring your vehicle back. It is in the parking lot out here. When you guys get discharged, we'll give you the keys and you can go home. Soon enough, they're discharged and they head home. They keep everything that happened to themselves, but they discuss it. Like, that was a giant. Yes, they agreed that it was some sort of giant. They start to look into humanoid creatures with wings. But then they start to realize, like, this wasn't like a gargoyle. This wasn't
how the people describe the Mothman, because they're looking at different explanations and sightings of whatever. But minus it being gray, being this neutral color, and having that powerful like wail, like just this whoosh, it reminded them of an angel. And, that's literally what both of them said to me. They did talk to one other. They've only shared it with one other guy, another friend of theirs who has gone hiking up in that region. And he has gone past, deeper into the Canadian Rockies. And they said, this is what we saw. We were sitting here watching, this beautiful pond, just relaxing. And all of a sudden it comes out of the water. This boulder, this thing that we thought was a boulder, a rock, is now a head and shoulders. And he's kind of like, what the? But he had his own experiences out there with something different. He had seen a large bipedal / quadruped dog, like a wolf, just this monster wolf, that reminded him of the Nothing from the Never-Ending Story. But it walked on 2 feet. It was quadruped at one point. And this thing was 8-9 feet tall. And it had stalked him through the woods, not attacking him, but making itself known as he's walking. He's on this trail here, and this thing's over here in the woods, just, creeping along, watching him. And he can see it off to the side through the trees. And that's when he started to realize, okay, this thing is following me. It's walking quadruped. Holy shit. No, it's now walking bipedal. And that's all it did for about an hour. Just watched him as it crept, probably 40 feet away from him. He never heard a growl. He never heard any kind of vocalization. Just that, it's quadruped at one point and then bipedal, and it keeps looking over at him. So like every time he'd look over, it was looking at him. And that was his kind of experience up in that region, which just really blew me away, because I'm like, well, that's totally, real strange shit. But yeah, it's connected. I believe that all of these things are connected. So I encourage you guys to map this area out, Tumbler Ridge, and look at it. Look north of Tumbler Ridge, and it's just this really deep, beautiful looking place. There's waterfalls and such out there, and just a really beautiful place. But it inhabits, there's something or some things that inhabit those woods, those mountains, that for some reason wants to be seen. It seems like this Dogman wanted to be seen. This gray angel, this watcher, wanted to be seen. Otherwise, why would it hit them with that wail, that just, and not an infrasound, because they could hear it. They just fucking bam, and it hit them. And then the giant. It's all connected. And the Canadian Rockies Native Americans have talked about how, strange northern Canada is, especially in the valley, the Headless Valley with the Wahila or whatever. and Rene Levasseur. You know, there's some really, really obscure and dangerous stuff going on up there. So that was the experience out of Tumbler Ridge. Let's jump into today's second portion of the video. All right, so as all of you know, a huge part of my obsession is deep underground military bases, Dolce. And I want to know more. Like, I want to know, and that's another thing that I talked about that day, was Phil Schneider, Tom Castello, Bill Cooper, in their sudden ending. You know, Castello just disappeared after his wife and kid were abducted. Bill Cooper was assassinated by the government outside of his home. Schneider, same way. Mysteriously, his death was labeled a mysterious death. But this is some very interesting information. And it really does kind of put a little more light onto the mystery of Dolce. So, the following information on subsurface anomalies and the Dolce base was compiled by researcher and explorer John Rhodes. Legends from different parts of the globe all tell of an underworld inhabited by mystical beasts of varied forms. I believe that the reptilian race still resides to this day underground, hidden away in dark crevices of the earth and in the depths of our ocean. The evidence supporting this proclamation is also available through recent reports and historical documentation. In the 60s, a subterranean nuclear blast occurred about 30 miles southwest of Dolce, New Mexico, right off of US 64. This nuclear blast was conducted under the umbrella of a project Plowshare and was named Gas Buggy. It has recently been alleged that this particular subsurface nuclear blast was used to create a hollowed out chute or chimney for development of a substation for a super secret tunnel system attached to the underground Black Book project base. According to the infamous Tom Castello, another hero of mine, a former Dolce-based security technician, this particular underworld city is a highly secretive base operated by humans as well as reptilian aliens and their worker caste. The commonly encountered Greys, it is here apparently that the multitude of experimentation projects are carried out, primarily genetic experimentations on kidnapped men, women, and children. There are a myriad of other specific science projects taking place at Dolce, including, but not limited to, atomic manipulation, cloning, studies of the human aura, advanced mind control applications, animal and human crossbreeding, visual and audio wiretapping. The list goes on. Dolce, New Mexico is a strange place indeed. It's a sleepy little town perched upon the Archuleta Mesa, just south of the Colorado border in northern New Mexico. Tourists pass through it sometimes, see little more than life in the town, other than that of a scruffy dog lazing spread out alongside the dirt road. Some claim that upon entering the town, black vehicles with heavily tinted windows tailgate them until they are outside of the city limits and heading out of Dodge. In addition, several other sources who wish to remain anonymous reported oddities in their work with Operation Plowshare during the 60s. The project was created under the guise of the use of an atomic bomb during peacetime and forged ahead under the umbrella of natural gas exploration. In fact, several of these multi-kiloton blasts were used as a rapid way of developing huge subsurface chambers for the facility development. It is then reported that technology to clean radiation is available and already in use in such projects. While I lectured Friday, August 13th of 93, this would be John Rhodes, in Las Vegas, I made public for the first time ever the floor plans to the levels. Oh no, this is Castello. When I lectured on Friday, August 13th, 93 in Vegas, I made public for the first time ever the floor plans of levels 1 and 6 of Dolce. These floor plans were reproduced from the originals that were handed to Tom Castello's friend. However, believes that it's time to begin revealing the missing pieces. Sorry, while I was reading that, I kept hearing something out behind me. All right, these floor plans were reproduced from the originals that were handed to Tom Castello's friend. This friend did not previously release the floor plans because they were being used as verification device to the claims of abductees that say they were there. To date, the originals have verified and disproved many stories circulating the field in ufology. This friend of Tom Castello, however, believes that it is time to begin to reveal the missing pieces. The Dolce base floor plan was illustrated as per the originals by Tom Castello, and I released it during my lecture in Vegas. Its layout, when inspected carefully, appears to be extremely strategically planned. From a vertical viewpoint, it resembles a wheel with a central hub and corridors radiating outward like spokes. This hub is the focal point of the entire base. It is surrounded by a central security that extends through all levels of the base. So imagine a wagon wheel. Like you're looking down and you're looking at a wagon wheel, and then another wagon wheel, and then another. And you look at 7. And that's the levels of Dolce. I myself believe that there are more levels, and so did Castello and a few others. But they've only talked about 1 through 7, 6 being Nightmare Hall, 7 being even worse than Nightmare Hall, supposedly. I believe this core to be the Achilles heel of the entire facility. It probably contains fiber optic communications and power lines. This would justify its highly guarded and central location, as well as explain its vertical continuation through the levels. With all communication lines and power lines focused toward the hub, it is possible that any one level could be completely locked down by its own security or security hubs from either above or below its own level. This would provide maximum control over the entire facility. So you're on level 3, let's say the aliens and humans of the one world government are on level 3. There's a surge or a delta force coming in. Boom, lock off level 2, lock off level 4, level 3 is secure. All the rest are secure as well, except 1 and 2, because they are in there now. These spokes or corridors radiating away from the central hub lead to numerous other labs in 5 different directions connecting the spokes, and a pentagon is revealed in this display. From above, the base resembles the layout of the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., complete with halls, walls, and military insignias. Since we do not have the exact heading on these coordinates, magnetic alignments are impossible to determine. When viewed laterally, its appearance takes on a look of a tree with a trunk at the center of its floors extending outward like branches. If this is a facility of science, then one could easily say that lateral appearance is like that of the tree of knowledge. So someone's comparing the tree of knowledge, Dolce, to the tree of knowledge. Maybe. I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying the comparison fits, right? Was this purposely designed this way, or does it just happen by coincidence? The overall design of the facility reminds one of a multi-stack subterranean Hopi Indian kiva, although I believe it is somewhat of a disservice to the Hopi to even be spoken of in association with the cave of horrors like Dolce. Its similarity in design should not be forgotten, though. As cultures around the world tend to bring their own styles of architecture with them during the periods of migration, so perhaps did the advanced civilization that originally built the Dolce base. If the reptilian influence over man is as great as archaic documentation and myth would have one believe, then there would have to be another subterranean dwelling similar to this in other locations. In 1961, Castello was a young sergeant stationed in Nellis Air Force Base in Vegas. His job was a military photographer with top-secret clearance. He later transferred to West Virginia, where he trained in advanced intelligence photography. He worked inside an undisclosed underground installation, and due to the nature of his new assignment, his clearance was upgraded to TSIV. He remained with the Air Force as a photographer until 1971, at which time he was offered a job with the Rand Corporation as a security technician. And so he moved to California, where Rand had a major facility, and his security clearance was upgraded to Ultra 3. The following year, he met a woman named Kathy. They married and had a son named Eric. In 1977, Tom was transferred to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where his pay was raised significantly and his security clearance was again upgraded, this time to Ultra 7. His new job was as a photo security specialist in the Dolce installation, where his job specification was to maintain, align, and calibrate video monitoring cameras throughout the underground complex, and to escort visitors to their destinations. Once arriving in Dolce, Tom and several other new recruits attended a mandatory meeting where they were introduced to the big lie, that the subjects being used for genetic experimentations were hopelessly insane, and the research is for medical and humane purposes. Beyond all that, all questions were to be asked on a need to know. The briefing ended with several threats of punishment for being caught talking to any of the insane or engaged conversations with others not directly involved with one's current task, venturing outside the boundaries of one's own work area without reason is forbidden, and most of all, discussing the existence of the joint alien/U.S. government base to any other outsider would generate severe and, if necessary, deadly repercussions. Thomas did his job as his superiors demanded. At first, his encounters with the actual gray and reptilian beings in the base were exhilarating, but soon he became acutely aware that all was not what it appeared to be. Wouldn't you... Man. How, I guess that's how they did it. That's how they roped him in, if you think about it. You're doing a great job, buddy. You're with the Air Force. Come work for us, the Rand Corporation. And which I do believe Rand owns BlackRock, if I'm not mistaken. But come work with us, and we'll give you some better pay and some more security clearance. And then here you go. Go here. Here's a ton of money, probably triple what he was making in California. And now you have Ultra 7 clearance. Who wouldn't want that? That amount of money, that amount, he's just has a new family, and he probably thinks or probably thought that he was doing good. It was the American way. But wouldn't you be a little suspicious? Don't say shit about these reptilian monsters or these grays that you see. I see a reptilian, I'm immediately going, that's a monster. Why are we hanging out with monsters? Anyway. Thomas slowly began to sense that there was an underlying current of tension existing between some of the personnel and himself. Once in a while, he would walk around the corner, interrupting a series of discussions between coworkers, and as Thomas, a security officer, these talks would die off into a short murmur, and the individuals would part company. One particular day on his job, he was going to a various place on the base to align the security monitoring cameras. When it was necessary, this afforded him the opportunity to venture out and witness things that would stagger the imagination, what I was just talking about. Later, he was reported seeing laboratories that investigated the following: auric energy fields of humans, astral and spiritual body voyaging and manipulation, psi studies, advanced mind control analysis and application, human brain memory recognition, acquisition and transfer, matter manipulation, and human/alien embryonic cloning. That's enough to scare anyone. Rapid human body replication by use of energy/matter transfer, complete with an individual's memory from the computer memory banks, and other scientific advances. Once in a while, Thomas would see some of the horrific genetic creations that were housed in separate sections of the base. These, he knew, couldn't have had anything to do with mental illness or health research. Thomas did not want to look any further. For every time he discovered more pieces to this underground maze, it became more and more overwhelming to accept. His curious mind, however, implored him to search for the truth regardless. One day, Thomas was approached by another employee who ushered him to the side. Here, he was approached by two other gentlemen that whispered the most horrifying words. The men, women, and children that were said to be mentally retarded were, in fact, heavily sedated victims of abduction. He warned the men that their words and actions could get them in big trouble if he were to turn them in. So these guys already know, hey, this is the security guard. We shouldn't be telling him shit. What if he turned us in? We're going to be killed. But they trust him. They trust him because they kind of see who he is. They know he's a freedom fighter. They were right. Thomas didn't turn them in. Instead, he made dangerous decision to quietly speak with one of the caged humans in an area called Nightmare Hall. Through their drug-induced state, he asked their name and their hometown. Thomas discreetly investigated the claim of the insane human during his weekends out of the facility. He discovered through his research that a person had been declared missing in their hometown after vanishing suddenly, leaving behind a traumatized family who followed dead ends and trailed flyers. Soon he discovered that many of the hundreds, perhaps thousands of men, women, and children from all areas of the world were actually listed as missing or unexplained disappearances. Thomas knew he was in over his head, and so were several of his coworkers. All he could do until somehow the situation changed was to be alert and extremely guarded with his thoughts. The Greys were telepathic, and they could read his mind. In 1978, tensions grew within Dolce. Several security and lab techs began to sabotage genetic experiments, increasing frail nerves and paranoia finally erupted into what is commonly referred to as the Dolce Wars. It was the literal battle between the reptilians and the humans for control of Dolce. It was the reptilians more than humans that were pushing the big lie and insisted on using humans in their experimentations. And those who did not survive the experimentations were used as sources for the liquid protein tanks, which fed both embryonic gray fetus as well as full-grown grays as a source of nourishment. The initial Dolce conflict began at level 3. So then after the war of Dolce, Thomas knew that he had to leave his job for his own peace of mind. However, now that he knew the truth about the abductees being held below, it was almost impossible to live a normal life. He would always be under observation and threat until the day he died. He also was aware of the fact that old age may not be his downfall. His demise could be easy, expedited by certain individuals. After one of his weekends away from the facility, he decided to return to work. This time through one of the less guarded air shafts announced and into the base by way of secret passage. Once inside, he proceeded to appear as if he was working his normal duties, taking charge of every thought as he passed by Grays. During this time inside the base, he removed all still photographs from the facility and treaties. Still photographs and treaties. This is where it's weird. Authentic signatures between Ronald Reagan and several Grays. So it wasn't presidents before, it was Reagan too. You know, like this shit is so deep. Then it gets really sad for Tom. He was then made aware by certain sources that his wife, Kathy and Eric, had been forcibly taken from their home to an undisclosed underground facility for safe holding until he decided to return items that he had taken, which were he had taken photos, film, paperwork, several packages that instructed several different people who he trusted explicitly. He also knew that his family would most definitely become permanently missing due to some tragic accident. Tom was at zero option. He quickly dissolved into a lonely life on the run from state to state, border to border, motels to sofas, always looking behind him, trying to find the best to look ahead. So he knew that his wife and son were done. And then this is, you know, you look up this man's name and they really destroy this man's name. Perhaps the only way to tell for certain would be to do as the unsung hero Paul Benowitz suggested. That is to make a full-scale military assault on the base, conquer the aliens, whether they be genetic creations or true alien or both, and bring all activities there under full congressional oversight. I am sure that there will be no lack of potential military recruits for this type of assault. After all, tens of thousands of young American men have in past been sent off and died to protect the CIA drug running operations in the Golden Triangle, to give their lives for the UN or New World Order, which the UN is the New World Order. Or in wars that were never meant to be won. That's what we've been fighting since I was a kid. You know, wars that were never meant to be won. Vietnam, Afghan, Iraq. You know, we won because we pulled out and we fucked everybody up. But did we win? Did we really win? Was the job done? Like World War II, we won with the help of other countries. World War I, we won. You know, Korea War, kind of, but after all that, that's when wars just were not won. They were just designed to be fought. This is something interesting. I just want to share this one bit of information really quick and then end today's first upload off with this. So I don't know if you can see how thick this is. This is a interview that was done with Tom Castello. I had shared one on my channel. I can't read this entire thing tonight, and I'm not going to even try. I'll probably do it in like the daytime when I'm wide awake. But I want to end this upload with a real thinker. Tom Castello replies, "They didn't try to create hybrids. The humans at the base did try to create hybrids. As far as Thomas knows, in line of experimentation was a failure. He didn't see alien human hybrids. He saw alien animal hybrids." So they didn't create alien human hybrids. What they created was alien animal and human animal hybrids. So the crawler, did they genetically manipulate and possibly create the Dogman thousands of years ago? Because the reptilians weren't just like, here in the 1900s. They were here thousands and thousands of years ago. Were these monsters created genetically? And if you think about that, thousands of years ago, these aliens being here underground had the capability to create things like that back then. That explains a lot of what went on in Mayan civilization, Egyptian civilization, both said to have stargates, both said to have these unique powers of whatever. There is proof of there being a nuclear explosion in Egypt thousands of years ago. These things have been here for a long time, and they've been experimenting with things that are evil, pure evil. And then that one world order, new world order, the UN wants to be part of it. And to be part of it, they have to contain us. And what do? How do they do that? Well, they build these huge FEMA encampments in Alaska or underground. These things are huge. Who knows? Hopefully never, but we may be on some kind of March trip, one day. Where are we going? Well, I got this great surprise for you. Check this out. It's the greatest thing. And then we find ourselves in one of these encampments. During these natural disasters, who's to say the people that are never found? They are, but they are in some FEMA camp up north where there is no kind of any eyes except the ones controlling everything.
And there you have it, folks. Tonight's second half. I do hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps the channel growing and going, and what gives folks like us a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free, just simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Everyone, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.